Welcome to the Rulebook Tavern Chronicles, where we are talking about role-playing games. Today, we will be diving deep into the Swashbuckler class. For anyone looking to become the most agile and stylish character in their game,
Yes.
you want to be that charismatic rogue with a flair for the dramatic. This is the class for you.
Exactly.
We'll cover everything from a summary of what makes a swashbuckler tick to their pros and cons,
Okay.
the best ancestries and backgrounds to consider, how they handle spells,
Right.
and some tips on how to truly master the art of swashbuckling.
It's all about bringing that sense of panache and daring to your game. Think of those classic duelists, light on their feet, weaving through combat and landing those precise strikes with almost balletic grace. That's the essence of a swashbuckler. They are all about agility, using their actions to weaken their opponents and then finishing them off with a powerful final blow.
Okay, I'm already picturing myself in a feathered cap,
Yeah.
leaping across tables and disarming my foes with a flick of my wrist. But let's back up a bit. For those unfamiliar with the mechanics, what actually makes a swashbuckler tick?
At their core, swashbucklers are built around a system of bonus actions called flourishes and powerful attacks called finishers. Imagine it like a carefully choreographed dance. Each flourish is a step, a move designed to weaken or distract your opponent, leaving them vulnerable to that final finisher attack. It's a high-risk, high-reward style that demands precise execution.
So it's not just about swinging your sword wildly.
No.
There's a real art to it. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of playing a swashbuckler?
Well, one of the biggest draws is their incredible mobility and maneuverability. They're like shadows on the battlefield, slipping past enemies, flanking them for extra damage, and controlling the flow of combat with their agility. Plus, there's a certain satisfaction that comes with outmaneuvering your opponents and landing those perfectly timed strikes.
Oh, yeah?
It's a very tactical and rewarding play style.
I bet it's satisfying. But every fighting style has its weaknesses, right? Yeah. What should aspiring swashbucklers be wary of?
Their reliance on precision is both their strength and their weakness. Missing a flourish can leave them open to counterattacks, and compared to some heavily armored classes, they can be a bit fragile. Positioning is key. You can't just stand toe-to-toe with a raging ogre and expect to come out unscathed. And you'll also want to consider that swashbucklers have limited spellcasting options.
So you can't rely on magic to bail you out of every situation. You got to be smart and strategic. So let's say I'm ready to embrace the swashbuckler life. What are some of the best ancestries to consider, especially based on what we know from the player core 1 and 2 books?
It really depends on what kind of swashbuckler you envision. If you're drawn to that classic nimble and dexterous duelist, elves are a fantastic choice. Their inherent dexterity bonus and natural proficiency with long swords make them a natural fit for a finesse-based build.
Elves are always a solid choice. Any specific elf heritages that would really bring the swashbuckler flavor?
For a touch of fiery flair, consider the Dragonblood heritage.
Interesting.
Imagine you're facing down a fearsome foe. They think they have you cornered. And then, bam, you unleash a fiery breath attack as part of your opening flourish. Setting them up for a devastating finisher. It's about style and surprise.
That's not something your opponent would see coming. I love it. But what if I'm drawn to the more cunning, trickster side of the swashbuckler?
Well, in that case, you might want to consider a halfling. Their inherent bonus to charisma and natural proficiency in deception really lean into the swashbuckler's ability to outwit and mislead opponents. Think of it like a game of chess. You're not just physically fighting. You're mentally manipulating your opponent, creating openings and exploiting their weaknesses.
So you're saying a halfling could be a real wild card on the battlefield?
Yes.
Intriguing. Now, what about backgrounds? What are some good options to flesh out my swashbuckler's story and skills?
The criminal background is always a solid choice for that classic rogue archetype. It provides valuable skill bonuses to stealth and thievery skills that are incredibly useful for a swashbuckler both in and out of combat. It just fits that whole image of a dashing rogue with a shady past.
Makes sense. You've got to be able to slip in and out of places unnoticed and maybe acquire a few useful items along the way.
Exactly. But if you're looking for something a little more flamboyant, and let's be honest, who doesn't love a bit of flair?
Oh, I do.
Then the performer background is worth considering. It grants skill bonuses to performance and acrobatics, which perfectly complement the swashbuckler's showmanship and agility. Imagine using your acrobatic skills to weave through combat, dodging blows with a flourish, and then landing a strike that would make an audience gasp.
Okay, I can definitely see the appeal. It's all about turning every battle into a performance. But let's talk about something that's been on my mind.
Okay.
We know that swashbucklers don't get their own spell list.
Right.
Does that mean they're completely out of luck when it comes to magic?
Not at all. While they may not be casting fireballs left and right, they can still be quite resourceful. They can utilize wands and scrolls to access a variety of useful spells. Imagine whipping out a wand of invisibility in the middle of combat to disappear from your enemy's sight.
That's pretty cool.
Or they can coordinate with their allies for magical support.
So it's about being clever and working with what you've got.
Exactly.
I like it. It sounds like there's a lot more strategic depth to swashbucklers than meets the eye.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to unpack here, especially when it comes to specific flourishes and finishers. But I think we need to sharpen our blades and prepare for the next round of this discussion.
Agreed. I'm already itching to hear more about those devastating finishing moves.
Yeah, me too. Welcome back, adventurers.
I'm all warmed up and ready to explore those flashy flourishes and finishers we were just talking about.
Yeah.
It's the bread and butter of a swashbuckler's combat style, right?
Absolutely. Think of a flourish as that opening act. A carefully calculated maneuver designed to set the stage for a truly stunning finale. And there are several flourishes a swashbuckler can choose from, each with its own tactical advantages.
Okay, so paint me a picture.
All right.
What are some examples of these flourishes in action?
Let's start with a classic.
Okay.
The disarming flourish. Picture this. You're facing a heavily armored foe. Their sword gleaming menacingly. With a flick of your wrist and a subtle footwork maneuver, you deflect their attack and send their weapon clattering across the cobblestones.
Oh, wow.
Suddenly, they're vulnerable, off balance, and you've got the upper hand.
I can practically hear the gasps from the crowd. It's not just about brute force.
No.
It's about using precision and finesse to disrupt your opponent's strategy.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the psychological impact. A disarmed opponent is a shaken opponent. But the swashbuckler has other tricks up their sleeve. Imagine a scenario where you need to create some breathing room. You perform the trip action with a swift leg sweep. You send your opponent sprawling to the ground, giving you precious seconds to reposition and prepare for your next attack.
Okay, I'm starting to see how a swashbuckler can dictate the pace of a fight, turning even a seemingly disadvantageous situation to their advantage.
Exactly.
They're not just fighting, they're dancing around their opponents, controlling the battlefield.
Precisely. And there's a flourish for almost any situation. Let's say you're facing a particularly agile opponent. You can use the feinting flourish, a deceptive maneuver that makes your opponent think you're going for one attack when you're actually planning something else entirely.
It's like they're always one step ahead, playing mind games with their opponents. But all this talk of flourishes has me itching to hear about the finishers. What exactly makes these attacks so special?
Well, as the name suggests, finishers are designed to be the final decisive blow, the culmination of all your fancy footwork and tactical maneuvers and just like flourishes. There are a variety of finishers to choose from, each catering to different combat styles and situations.
Okay, lay it on me. What are some of these spectacular finishing moves?
Let's start with the bleeding finisher. Imagine you've just disarmed your opponent with a disarming flourish. They're panicked, scrambling to retrieve their weapon. As they lunge forward, you seize the opportunity, striking them with a precise thrust that leaves them not only wounded, but also bleeding profusely. Now, they're not only weakened from the initial blow, but also taking damage over time. That's a strategic advantage you can't ignore.
That's brutal, but effective.
It's
not just about ending the fight quickly. It's about wearing your opponent down, making them bleed for every mistake.
Exactly. But if you prefer a more direct approach, there's always the deadly finisher. This move is all about raw power. delivering a single devastating blow that can potentially end a fight in an instant.
Wow.
It's the perfect choice when you need to eliminate a high-priority target quickly or make a statement.
So we've got options for both wearing an opponent down and delivering a swift knockout.
Yes.
That kind of versatility is what makes a swashbuckler so dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a question about these finishers.
Sure.
Do they always require a flourish to be effective?
That's a great question, and it brings us to a crucial point about swashbuckler tactics.
Okay.
While finishers are at their deadliest when executed after a successful flourish.
Right.
Some, like the bleeding finisher and the deadly finisher, can be used without one. However, there's a catch.
I'm sensing a but coming.
You got it. Without the setup of a flourish, these finishers will lack their full potency.
Right.
You might deal less damage or have a reduced chance of landing a critical hit.
So it's a calculated risk.
Exactly.
Sometimes you need to unleash your full power, even without the ideal setup.
Right.
So it's all about weighing your options, considering the situation, and making those split-second decisions that can turn the tide of battle.
Exactly. It's that combination of tactical thinking, agility, and a touch of daring that makes the swashbuckler such a dynamic and exciting class to play.
I'm already picturing myself outwitting my foes and finishing them off with style. But I'm curious, how does the swashbuckler handle those situations where brute force isn't enough? Let's talk about their less tangible weapons, their mental prowess and manipulative skills.
Ah, yes. The swashbuckler's mental game is as sharp as their blade.
Okay.
They are masters of deception and misdirection, using their charm and wit to manipulate opponents both in and out of combat.
Okay, now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. Tell me more about how a swashbuckler uses their mind as a weapon. We're back and ready to explore the swashbuckler's cunning mind. It's not all about fancy footwork and swordplay, right?
You're absolutely right. A true swashbuckler is just as sharp with their wit as they are with their blade. They know how to use deception and misdirection to their advantage, turning an opponent's strengths into weaknesses.
So how do they actually pull this off in the game? Do they have any special abilities or tricks?
Feats are where things get really interesting. As a swashbuckler levels up, they can choose feats that enhance their existing abilities and grant them new ways to outsmart their opponents.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What are some examples of these mind-bending feats?
One that immediately comes to mind is the confident finisher feat. Imagine this. You've just landed a devastating finisher on a fearsome ogre. Not only have you dealt a significant blow, but you also demoralize them, leaving them shaken and frightened.
It's like a double whammy. You're hitting them physically and mentally. I can see how that would be incredibly effective, especially against tougher opponents.
Exactly. And then there's the witty feint feat. Remember how we talked about feinting flourishes? Well, this feat lets you use your deception skill instead of athletics for feints, making you even more unpredictable. Your opponents will never know what you're going to do next.
So you're saying a swashbuckler can be a master manipulator, using their charm and wit to control the flow of battle just as effectively as their sword.
Precisely. They are always a step ahead, reading their opponents, exploiting their weaknesses, and using their environment to their advantage. It's like watching a master chess player anticipating moves and setting traps.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of the swashbuckler. I feel like I've learned so much about their combat style, their versatility, and even their psychological tactics.
It's been a pleasure to break it all down with you. Remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many ways to customize a swashbuckler and make them your own.
Any final words of wisdom for those ready to embrace the swashbuckler life?
Above all, have fun with it. The swashbuckler is all about style, flair, and a bit of daring. Don't be afraid to get creative with your maneuvers, experiment with different feats, and really make this character your own.
I love that advice. It's not just about winning, it's about putting on a show, right? Thanks for joining us on the swashbuckling adventure.
The pleasure was all mine.
Hope you enjoyed this deep dive with us, and see you soon to talk about other classes.